Yo, what's up, guys? In recent times, there's been a lot of conversations and heated debate about who should be your next of kin and whether being a next of kin automatically confers on you the right to inherit a deceased person's property. But in all of the conversations going on, has anyone bothered to ask what Nigerian law says about the status of next of kins? Who are they according to law and what are their rights and privileges? If you're good for it, let's dig into it. Is it even possible that there's an even better option we can explore when it comes to distributing our assets and other resources to our loved ones? It's something we can explore on the show. So, if you're ready, I'm all good for it. You're welcome to the Pro Pupil Podcast. Now, let's get into it. So, a good way to start would be to define what the term next of kin means according to Nigerian law. And we have case law to help us with that. Cases have been decided on this issue where the judges have clearly defined who a next of kin is. For example, in the case of Joseph versus Fajimilehi and another, the court defined who a next of kin is as to be understood in three senses, right? In three ways. Sense one, the next of kin, which is in order of priority. The next of kin is one who is your nearest blood relative, meaning that person who is to be contacted in the case of an eventuality, emergency, or death. Whoever should be that person who is closest to you and should be contacted if anything happens to you. That person is your next of kin. Incidentally, that person can also get to make medical decisions on your behalf when you're not in a position to do that for yourself. So, in the eventuality of death, a medical emergency, your next of kin is that person who should be contacted first and who can make decisions on your behalf because it is assumed that at that moment in time, you're not capable of making that decision for yourself. For example, a woman who is in labor will need to have her form signed if she's to be committed to surgery for a cesarean operation, for example. It is necessary that her next of kin signs the form giving his or her consent for her to be taken to surgery. For obvious reasons, she's not in a position to give that consent herself, but whoever is her next of kin gets to make that medical decision on her behalf. That is the status of a next of kin. However, in the third sense, the next of kin can also be understood to be a heir, someone who gets to inherit property under certain circumstances, which we will define. But by general implication of that definition, next of kin is simply that person who is to be contacted in the event of an emergency, accident, or death happening to someone. Okay, now the exception to that is where a next of kin is clearly mentioned in a will as being entitled to some or all of property. In that event, that next of kin also becomes a heir who is entitled to inherit by reason of being mentioned in the will. But in the event that a will does not expressly state or make provision for inheritance by a next of kin does not automatically become entitled to inherit property. There is no way that happens. The will is king, period. Now, a question that naturally pops up is, what if the deceased passed on without leaving a will? He did not write a will stating who was to inherit what, and he has the next of kin, right? Does that next of kin automatically become entitled to inherit his property? Well, the position of the law is very clear. Even where a person dies intestate without leaving a will, right? That next of kin is still not automatically entitled to inherit his property. Who will inherit his property will depend on under which law he got married. Will he get married under English law, under customary law, or Islamic law? Each of these laws have their laws of inheritance that determines who gets what when someone passes on. But one thing they are all agreed on is the fact that the next of kin does not become automatically entitled to inherit property in the event of the demise of his benefactor. And that's period. Now, another question that naturally pops up is, how about those of us like my humble self who have not acquired substantial property and assets that we can pass on to our loved ones, but we do have a few nairas in the bank, and we want to ensure that our loved ones are financially catered for in the event that we transit. So, do we have to write a will for that too? Well, not necessarily. All you need is a POD form. POD stands for payable on death. A POD form is a form you get from your bank which allows you state a name or two of people who can get access to the money in your account in the event that you pass on. With that form, they don't need to go through probate, apply for letters of administration, or go through any traditional inheritance process just to get the money in your account. So long as they can identify themselves with accompanying documents to prove that they are the beneficiaries you stated in your POD form, your funds will be transferred to their accounts and they'll be well taken care of. So, my advice, head to your bank today and demand for a POD form so you can ensure that the funds you've been storing up in the bank actually goes to the people who will need it the most in the event that something happens to you. Also, keep in mind that during your lifetime, you are at liberty to change the names you have stated in your POD form as beneficiaries who can access your account at any time you wish. You can always change or revoke who those beneficiaries are. Kind of similar to how you can amend a will just before you eventually pass on. It's the same procedure. So please consult with your bank and find out what the procedure is to obtain a payable on death form, aka POD, or whatever other name it is called. It serves that same function. Now, the procedure may differ from bank to bank. There's really no hard and fast rule to this thing. After all, life is not red or blue, it's purple.